We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. Today's special edition, we are talking personnel is policy, what's happening with Trump and Europe. It's going to be quite the show. Please remember, Liberty Nation Radio is sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. Very fortunate to have with us back in the studio, Liberty Nation's legal affairs editor, Mr. Scott Cosenza. How are you, sir?
Delighted to be back in my perch on my position in a segment on the big show, Mark. That's
your time in purgatory is over. We won't expose.
Gee, okay.
No, it's good to have you on. So I guess what I really want to talk about today is the idea that personnel is policy, which is a term that you presented to me a short while ago. And I think it's so fitting because we've got the brand new Trump administration in place with, I believe, all of the major appointments now settled, confirmed, in position. And if people want to know what the next 4 years has in store in terms of what each of these agencies are going to be doing, you need look no further than who Donald Trump has put in charge of them.
Well, there's going to be one part of your statement that I vehemently disagree with. I think it goes right to the heart of things, which is saying that most of the important positions have been decided on and confirmed or implemented, and that is not true. Directly to your point, an agency head may want any number of things, but unless that agency head can rely on deputies to execute their mission, which one presumes is the president's mission for that agency and what's to be done, then we have what we have kind of always had in at least probably my lifetime in Washington, which is the bureaucracy just kind of continues to move along. They the pace, by which they do their bidding is maybe accelerated or retarded a bit, but it's slow train coming, regardless. And that's what maybe, I still say, though it looks like a promising start, but we'll have to view this through the lens of history. It may be finally changing now with Donald Trump's second term in office.
Yeah. Okay. Good point. So there's, so for example, there are certain agencies that don't get a specific appointment that goes through Congress for advice and consent, and
most of the appointments, thousands of appointments, are not confirmed by the Senate. They're direct presidential appointments. So, for instance, at the top of any agency that has offices around the country, all the people who are at the tops of those agency offices are generally presidential appointees. But they are not confirmed by the Senate. This is about once the president settles on the name of the person they think is going to be the right person, they go ahead and put it forward. And as you imagine, they kind of fill from the top down, right? So those things typically take place well after the actual cabinet secretaries and agency heads are installed.
So I think a couple of the more interesting ones that would fit into that category are podcast host Dan Bongino, who is now tasked as the assistant director of the FBI. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
So, yeah. What do you make of that?
It's interesting. The thing that I find interesting most of all about it is, and I don't know all of Mr. Bongino's history, he ran for Congress just, I think, one district north of where I am recording this from, in Maryland is where he ran. And I met him on his campaign trail. This is probably a dozen years ago. And he had, even then, a message of limited government, and that was his motivation. I know that, of course, he's a famous podcaster and famously a former member of the U.S. Secret Service, the detail, as they say, the protective detail around the president. So he's got some really insider knowledge and understanding, but also the management of lots of people in and of itself is a skill. So when it's executing policy that the president wants for certain investigatory preferences or impetuses, he may be a great person for that. I'm hoping that he also does a good job of managing. There's the workaday job of a federal police force of thousands of people who are supposed to be not investigating presidents and congresspersons, but investigating the crimes against Americans, whether it's the kind of more pedestrian rip-off scheme for the little old lady over some scam call that costs her thousands, up into and including some massive highfalutin stock swindle, including technical aspects that I can't even understand. That's all federal crime, and it would be great if the federal government actually protected us from those who local police, by the way, cannot do. It's one of the things that the FBI was founded to do, was prosecute crimes that are ill-suited towards criminal prosecution, state and locally.
Yes, I think that really comes back to the idea that personnel is policy, because it seems highly unlikely after the massively contentious last 4 years where Donald Trump was dragged through every court imaginable for crimes real and imagined.
They just applied the law to the facts, Mark. What do you...
Yeah, of course. Naturally, they applied the law, the new law that they made up to fit.
Let's just take a moment to remind everyone that when Donald Trump was prosecuted, the Justice Department used new interpretations of previously existing federal law, which had never been applied in those manners, and then proclaimed it was like a pedestrian-like prosecution of just applying the law to the facts. And I said it because it's fantastic and no one believes it who has an understanding of how they've ever operated, and then decided to newly operate against Donald Trump. So what would be great for the Trump administration FBI, by the way, and I know you didn't ask me, I'm going to answer it anyway, though, if they turn...
In fact, I'll go and have a coffee. You carry on asking and answering the questions, and I'll see you at the end of the show.
If they turn the clock back from all of that entrepreneurial, let's get involved in more and more things that weren't included in our grant of authority and our purview, and return to, I asked people at the time Donald Trump was picking his making his choices for the top of justice. If I asked many people this question, which was, if you thought you were the victim of a federal crime, for instance, we had an instance where one of Liberty Nation website properties was hacked. We didn't even call the police or the FBI to report this crime. And the reason why is because literally, I would imagine they would just laugh us out. Like, there would be nobody taking a report. Nobody would actually care. Not that it was the crime of the century, but that's my expectation as the victim of federal crime, to have literally zero information paid to it. Meanwhile, some election issue that might benefit the establishment and punish anti-establishment forces, you might expect them to be all over it.
Very much so, which is why I think Kash Patel's made it rather clear, the new director of the FBI, that he intends to get back to the basics of crime fighting, which I don't see how that can be a bad thing, because it almost seems ludicrous to assume that what we've seen for the last 4 years was just protecting everyday people. It was pursuing prosecution for something that wasn't pertinent at that time, other than the fact that it would potentially stymie Donald Trump's re-election. It's something that could have been outsourced, I'm not sure to whom, but it could have been outsourced, but not drawing the very, very specific resources that were in place at that time. And I think that kind of attitude towards get back to crime fighting has got to be very comforting to Americans who have witnessed quite a lot of lawlessness. Now, speaking of lawlessness, we'll be back with Scott Cosenza.
And I want to talk about Kash Patel when we come back.
Kash Patel and the ATF. This is going to be fun. Don't go anywhere. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.